Welcome, listener. Welcome back to my podcast. This is the longest break I've taken between episodes, and I'm glad to be back. Had some life stuff happen that required prioritizing other things, but yeah, so I'm back. Today's episode is with my nephew, Dakota. He was one of the first people that I told I'd gotten sober 10 plus years ago, and it's fun to talk about his memory of that conversation as well as our journey together as a uncle and nephew with his uncle being a sober guy and a loud one at that. So let's get this conversation started. We've talked about doing this now for a while, and here we are. Oh, first off, who are you?
I'm Brett's nephew. I'm Dakota. I'm 25. I'm Brett's brother's son. Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it. And you're a family member, so we bring another perspective in here. And I think we've known each other for a while. And so let's start with kind of what happened for that first story. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Great.
Okay. So I had gotten sober in 2013, and I think it was visiting Spokane at the time. And I remember how it went down, and you say you do remember that. Yeah. So let's see if you got it correct. If you don't, I'll fix it.
Jump in and correct me. So 2013. I was 15, maybe about to turn 16, or I just turned. You might have been there for my birthday.
I think that was it. Yeah.
So I was turning 16. And just real quick, what I don't know, I don't know is, I guess, how long had you been sober at this point when you were coming? And so it's August of 2013.
So May, June, July, August. So if it is August, 2-3 months.
Mm-hmm. What I remember is us being outside at my parents' house, and our neighbors had a golf cart, and you grabbing the golf cart, and whether we were on it together already, you drove over, picked me up, whatever it was, but asking me if I would hop on the golf cart with you and go take a little drive. And we, this is a big yard at my parents' house at that time, and drove a ways away into a little private area. And I remember you telling me that you were sober. And I don't know if I really remember much of the conversation beyond that, because I guess diving, however you want to do this, we can look back now. I don't think that was something that I was aware of was going on. You getting sober, you having the need to be sober. So this was all not something I had considered it at all. Did I miss anything there?
No, I can tell kind of what was going on for me.
Yeah, I would love to. We've never talked about this. I mean, we have obviously had that conversation when it happened, but we've never looked back. And, that was 10 years ago now. And I would love to know what was what you were thinking and feeling, and what was going through your mind, getting ready to do that, and what that felt like for you.
Yeah, it was intense for me. Everybody's got their story. I've got mine, right? And I wasn't somebody who came out of the gates just ready to share with the world. I mean, it took me a long time to get comfortable sharing with the world, but I knew that there were certain people that I wanted to let know, and fate would have it, we were in the same location together. And so, having had no reps at it, I was nervous. I mean, you're a 16-year-old kid, right? And I'm just now figuring out how I'm going to be able to go every night without getting lit, right? And so, yeah, there was a lot of anxiety around it for me, and I thought it was going to be this big thing to, in that golf cart. So that's the way I remember it, pulling off and saying, and the way I remember it is saying, why I was late this morning. I wanted to let you know that I had gone to an AA meeting.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, I know that you mentioned that.
And to me, to say that was some kind of a weird thing to say, even to utter. So that's what I remember telling you, and you just kind of listened. I don't remember you. I think you said thank you thank you for letting me know. But now, just based on what you said, sounds like you were oblivious of the need.
And we can talk more about that if you want to. I'm happy to dive into the. Now I've had time to reflect on that and what my experience was like. Now that I can recognize some of the other things that were going along that I didn't necessarily know at the time. But when you said that you hadn't had a practice before, so obviously Molly knew.
Yeah.
Well, I would hope that she knew it.
Yeah. She knew. Yeah.
So had you not? My parents didn't know, or
I can't remember when I told your parents. My recollection of the order of people that I told was obviously Molly. And I don't remember exactly who came first, but I'm still in Fort Collins at that point. And I know your sister Cassidy was one of them because my sobriety date just happened to land on her birthday.
On her birthday. Not
intentional. If I had it over, I would have gotten sober a day earlier.
On my birthday?
Yeah, maybe on your birthday. But I know that I had told her over the phone. I know that I had told my sister over the phone. And those
was an in-person one, really.
This was my first in-person one that I recall. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That was the case.
Yeah, it's through there too where, just to paint a little picture for you, I'd gotten somewhat comfortable going to AA meetings, so much so that I was going sometimes 2 and sometimes even 3 times a day. And just to paint a little funny picture, this meeting I would go to on a Sunday, we would spill out across the street after this meeting and fill up this restaurant with people who had just come out of this giant meeting and sitting at tables all around this restaurant. And I remember seeing the Alcoholics Anonymous has this blue book. It's called the Big Book, right? And we had them sitting on our table, and I was feeling sick to my stomach that the waitress would see it and that she would overhear us talking about being sober. So that's the level of secrecy that I was still at with how comfortable I was. So yeah, which is insane. If you look around the room, the whole restaurant is full of people talking about this stuff.
Yeah, but it takes time to get comfortable
for me
level.
Yeah, for me. So to have that rep with you was, it was intense. But I felt like we were connected, and I wanted you to know. Like that was one of my motivations too. Is I wanted you to know. I wanted all the kids to know. As it made sense.
I think you letting all of us know was really important, and being open and honest about it in that way made it so that it isn't this weird thing that we are all like. It's not some open secret in the family,
Right.
It's just open. There's no secretiveness behind it, and I think that's super important now, but especially for when I was 15, 16, my first exposure really that I can think of to this kind of concept and what this meant to a person I knew, how it affected a person I knew, how it affected my family. If it had been, a furtive thing, if it was a thing I was hearing from other people, if it wasn't a thing that you told me yourself, or if you did and approached it in a different way that wasn't, let's have a conversation about this, but in a way that's, more shameful, then I think, things would be a lot different than they are in our family and the context of our relationships and how we interact with each other. So yeah, looking back, we can start branching out into other things, but I think back on that and was obviously, like I said, surprised and not aware that this was going on, but I'm very appreciative that we had that and were able to talk through it in that way.
Yeah, good. And I'm glad you remember it too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course.
I mean, you weren't that young, but I remember telling Rainier and Forrest, my other 2 nephews, I know where I am when I'm telling them in the basement of my folks' house. I'm glad you remember it, and it has been important to me, and I think it's gotten easier over time. It has for me, at least, to talk about and have it out in the open.
I feel you do a really good job, I think, checking in with us every now and then, whether that's because, something externally has happened that has prompted that and you want to, just remind us that you're always open to talk, or just making it a regular thing. You at least once a year, I would say, reach out, or when we're together, just say, hey, just, if you guys are having any questions or issues with this kind of thing, personal or, about my experience, whatever it is, you leave those doors of communication open at all times, and in my perspective, at least. So yeah, I always feel like comfortable talking to you about it. And then when we're at family things, I don't think others are drinking or having wine or whatever. And it's never a thing where I at least I don't think I feel uncomfortable if I'm like, I want to have a glass of wine in front of Brett, or I want to talk to Brett about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's play in there a little bit, because I think that's a common one too for people that, one, are in my shoes and the other in other person's shoes.
You're saying it's the idea of somebody who's not sober consuming alcohol around somebody who is, and then on the other end of the coin, the person who's sober being around others who are consuming.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's no fast rule on this. I come from my story, my perspective on this, but it's a common one. Like, people are like, well, what do I do? Mm-hmm. And it actually surprises me that doesn't weigh on you a little bit, because that's awesome. And I think it's also part of where I am with my sobriety, that I'm okay taking care of myself and, removing myself or whatever I need to do to stay healthy. But for a lot of people, that's a scary thing. Like, can I have drinks around this person? Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're in a place where you don't think about it. It's like,
well, I mean, I think about it.
Yeah.
I'm not like, I want to get blasted in front of Brett or anything, but I don't want to do that in front of anybody. I just think the context of what we've been through, what we've talked about together with it, and then what our relationship, like, we're close. We've been close a long time. Like, we've known each other a long time.
We have known each other a while, yeah.
If the context were different and I felt that, what I'm saying is, I don't think the approach that we have to it right now it's not like that's the right way. That's just what I think the context dictates. And if it were different, it would be different, and I'd be fine with that. If I felt like, I can't do this in front of Brett for whatever reason, because we talked about it and I knew it made you uncomfortable, because it made me uncomfortable for any reason, then I would, be fine approaching it in a different way. And maybe, it changes over time. Who knows? 10 years from now, we could be talking about this in a totally different way. But with where we're at right now, that's how I feel about it. And if something were to change, then I'd be comfortable changing that approach as well.
Well, let's make that let's try for that. We can't know the circumstances that are in front of us, but let's keep trying for that as best we can. And this is, one uncle to one nephew, right? Your reference a minute ago about reaching out about this. One of the things that I think is true from my perspective, at least, is that it's okay to talk about it, right? Even in the sense of, hey, do I have a problem? So not now, or not in the future, or, whatever incremental or things that you can explore. Because I'm a big believer in curiosity being the key to this, and this meaning moving towards sobriety if you need it, and you can't get curious if you don't have a place to go that's safe to talk about stuff, right? So that's my goal, is not to be ready to come down hard on anybody to say, oh my God, stop, because that wouldn't have worked with me,
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that more, because when I was 15, 16, when you were telling me this for the first time, I had never had drugs. The only alcohol I had been maybe with my parents having a sip of their wine, but I'd never had a drink.
Right.
I'd never gotten drunk. I'd never gotten high. I'd never done any of that stuff. I knew friends of mine who did that, but I was not experienced. I had no relationship with this other than growing up on both sides of my family. Like, alcohol was, a normal thing to see around at family gatherings on either side of the family, a parent having a glass of wine at night, whatever it was, it was a thing that I just kind of took for granted, I guess, as, oh, that's normal to have around. And again, not saying it's right or wrong or whatever, but that's just what my experience growing up was like. So I kind of like viewed alcohol as like this, just like, that's what adults drink. Like, adults have alcohol. I don't think I knew what the effects could be from school and classes and things like that we had to take growing up. But I don't think I had a real concept of, this is the kind of negative thing that can come from that. So when you told me, I had no personal relationship with drugs and alcohol. That was my first exposure, I think, in a lot of ways, to like really thinking about what I wanted that relationship to look like in the future. Whereas you already had one, it sounds like, and had, whether it had been going on for a long time or whatever, you already had some kind of internal relationship with what you imagined how you would interact with drugs and alcohol throughout your life at that time. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, age 13, when I took my first drink and suddenly realized that I could talk to girls. I was like, well, whatever this is,
Keep it coming.
keep it coming.
I'll have what I'm having.
Oh, and then some more, and ideally with others, but at the end, it was just by myself for the most part. So it gets that's sort of the trajectory of my thing. But yeah, I was 100% full throttle. And once I got to college, it accelerated big time. And then once I got out of college, and now I'm a touring musician, it just kept I just kept ratcheting it up, and I wanted anybody that came in contact with me that asked any questions or said anything, I wasn't interested in being around them. Mm-hmm. So, for our family outings and stuff, a lot of those beach trips and stuff, I was absolutely blasted the entire duration of those. You don't have any recollections of those?
No. I mean, I know it now just from, the 10 years that we've been talking about it. And
right.
Now that as a family, we've gotten comfortable.
Right.
I'll be with grandma and grandpa and a photo will pop up and grandma will make like some joke about it or something. Yeah. So I know about it through anecdote now, but no, as a kid, I don't have, I could probably point to a few times now looking back that in hindsight, I can be like, well, I would assume that Brett was drunk now, but in the moment, no, I don't have any memory of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where in my perception, I think it was, again, like, oh, adults are drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
That's normal.
Right.
I didn't really have a concept of what too much or what the line or what that looked like when it came into practice. And then, I thought of it was like, this is my fun Uncle Brett. Like he's here, he's being silly, he's having a good time. Like we didn't live, in the same town. So it was 3-4 times a year we'd see each other. Right. And so to me it was, oh, this is what it's like to spend time with my fun uncle. Like he's having a great time. Yep. He's partying. He's the life of, of this family gathering. So I think as a kid, that's really how I was interpreting it, but not understanding that alcohol was playing a role in that at all.
Yeah. And for a lot of people that they can have those kinds of events and things and then go home and resume their normal life. That wasn't me. That was just another day. That was just another day. Yeah. And that was, as over time, I figured out, whoa, wait a second here. Certain people can party with me, can, go on the ride with me. And then they tell me, oh man, I haven't had a beer since, that weekend. And I knew full well that I had more at home because now I didn't have any, overseers or any worry about people judging me. So it was just, and that's this disease. That's the brain disease that, accelerates over time. And, so I as we go along in life, sooner or later, you're going to want to get ripped in front of me, or maybe not want to, but it just so happens that works out. Right. And that's a place that we'll have to navigate as we go. Yeah. Closest place I've gotten to it so far is, the wedding, and I won't name particular weddings, just in case somebody's uncomfortable with that, but people were, getting into it, and it was awesome. But you know what I did? I had already talked to Molly about it, and I had 2 cars out in the road. And so if and when she wanted to stay and I started getting uncomfortable, I'm out of there. Yeah. Now for some people that can be extremely dangerous, right? So I'm telling my story at that point in my curve, but for some people, that concern about, well, we're having such and such person over, what we gotta do stuff. Yeah, it's
like walking on eggshells.
And it can be appropriately for some people. Like you talk to people that are early in the sobriety or even later. I've met people and they just say, no alcohol in my house. Yeah,
which is fine. Again, that's fine. Yeah. And if you ever got to a point where it was like that, then we'd figure it out. Yeah, we'd deal with it.
We deal with it. Exactly. But I don't want to come off as if my story or my comfort level then, now, whatever is some sort of blueprint, because I don't believe it is. And I think people that are concerned for themselves about going into situations, or that they're concerned about people coming into their lives, into their house, that are newly sober or been sober a while, that's an appropriate thing.
Yeah.
I can remember one Christmas at another family's house where there was word, I was still drinking, of course, and there was word that there was somebody coming to the house that was sober, and we had to empty out the chocolate dishes that had Bailey's in the interior of the chocolates. And I remember how irritated I was with that. I remember how, what is up? That's crazy. Mm-hmm. And now I realize it wasn't crazy. Mm-hmm. It was actually amazingly progressive and thoughtful of this group, because the thought of me biting into a hunk of Bailey's
on accident
is not a good situation. That may sound crazy to some people, but I don't know what happens to those synapses and neurons in my brain that will suddenly go, "Ooh, where have you been?" Mm-hmm. Well, I'm this far. And that's the place I don't want to get to.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a lot on that, but I think that's a cool thing to have an awareness about for yourself and for others.
And to kind of bring it back to what we were talking about, like our different experiences as kids that age. You talked a lot about curiosity and giving us the opportunity to be curious.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that was, whether I took you up on it or not, I can't remember what we've taught. We've had so many conversations, whether there was any time I actually did it or not, I can't remember. But having that as a door that was open for somebody like me who didn't have a relationship with it, didn't know anything about it.
Right.
That was so invaluable to know that I had that as a resource.
Well, that's just awesome. That means a lot to me.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what I'm doing. So that's landing is really key. And for your generation too, Dakota, like there was a time in my life, if somebody opened up their pocket and they had just about anything in it, I was ready to eat it.
You're ready to go.
Yeah. At the addition of fentanyl into the world that we're navigating, I can't imagine what that would have been like for me as a kid. So can I quiz you on your knowledge of fentanyl and...
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll say, while I have had alcohol since I turned 16.
Yeah.
I'm not an experimenter with drugs. I'm not really around those worlds a lot, I don't think.
Okay.
And when I am, I'm at a concert and people I don't know happen to be doing that kind of stuff. But that's not really a world I have spent a lot of time in. So I'll do my best, but I just want to caveat for whoever's listening that I don't know if my answers necessarily reflect the average experience of someone my age who is, around this kind of stuff more than I am.
Yeah. So what's your knowledge of fentanyl?
Well, it's bad.
Yeah.
I know that.
Drugs are bad.
I mean, I know about, just in general terms, the opioid crisis. I know that more and more frequently young people are taking some kind of substance and then finding out later that it has whatever traces of fentanyl or more than traces, in something that should not have that. And you wouldn't expect to have that. So I have been in situations where, I've been at a party or a big concert where there are drugs around. And I think, I always approach it. And I know a lot of people my age, like talking with my partner or my close friends, that I think just the prevailing mindset of folks my age is that you don't take something that you don't know the person giving it to you, number one. And even then, like, you ask some questions about what it is, where they got it to verify beforehand. But again, I'm not taking stuff. So that's just a best practice that I am aware of. It could be different for others.
Yeah. I'm going to just do a public service announcement here real quick through here, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So when I was a kid, for me, cocaine, ecstasy, you name it, I was interested in it. There were a time when, and opioid pills, right? I did a lot of pills, and that game is changed big time with the invention of, and the insertion of fentanyl into the possibilities. They're pressing pills to make them look like prescription pills, and they're not. They've got fentanyl in them. And the thing is that the dosages on it is so unregulated that it's killing people. Mm-hmm. And, I've talked to, it's a crisis. and people that parents that have lost kids to it, they actually refer to it as fentanyl poisoning as opposed to overdose because in some cases they thought they were taking a Percocet.
You don't know.
And so they don't want they want to have that delineation. So anyway, this is just public service announcement to all kids, if any listen to this, that it's not the same as when I was a kid. And I'm terrified by the prospect of any of you kids, accidentally being in a party and thinking, yeah, let me try that. And if it's laced with fentanyl, being a roulette situation. Yeah. So change topics?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there's some proof. There's a lot of evidence that says that people who have addiction or substance use disorder, genetics is a big part of it. So you've kind of already alluded to your relationship with drugs and alcohol. I'm just curious if you would be willing to kind of stretch on that a little bit of your own self-awareness and for the various family members that you're around, what you think about that concept and the possibility that you've got some preloaded situations that could show up, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I take that very seriously because I that science is pretty convincing to me. And I think just as a personality type, like I have the type of personality that something like that could happen to, where I feel like there's some chance of some part of me where someday if I tried whatever, that would, like you said, trigger whatever. And then I'm on a road I don't like that just genetically, personality wise, I feel like that's a reality. So I'm careful about that stuff and I keep that in mind. As far as we can split it into two. The drug portion, that's just not something I've ever pursued for whatever reason. I think even as a kid, I just was never interested in that. Right. So, and I don't really have a lot of interest. Not that it's good or bad or whatever, but so I think at least I'm safe from that for whatever that's worth. Yeah. And then as far as alcohol goes, that's a tougher one just because I have been drinking since I was 21 now. So whatever, 5 years. So since I became an adult. And it's just always on my mind in some capacity, got to be careful with this or that. And thankfully, and again, maybe this changes as I age or whatever. Thankfully, I think I have the ability to stop, to control that part of myself to, if I have a night where I drink a lot, spend the next few days being like, all right, I don't need to drink for a while. I can reset, whatever that is. Yeah. I can do that in a way. It sounds like you weren't able to for whatever reason. So thankful that I'm able to do that, but I don't take that for granted at the same time where, I know that could change for whatever reason. So I try to monitor all of that stuff. And just keep it in mind, be careful. Does that answer your question? If you want to dive in on anything in particular, I'm happy. No,
that's great. Just the awareness and I think that's spot on. And then of course you could always talk to me if you wanted to. And, but that's awesome. All right.
I will say one other thing about it too. I think one thing that doesn't scare me, but does make me keep it in mind too, is that I like drinking alcohol. Sure. I both from I like doing it with friends. I think similar to you, when I did start having it for the first time, it made me be not necessarily, I can talk to girls, but it made it more comfortable in social situations. And now as I've grown up and entered the professional workforce, for example, we don't need to get into specific instances, but being at some big work event where everybody else is drinking, it sucks to be the one who's not, as and it's uncomfortable, and around a bunch of strangers or whatever, having a drink helps ease things up. So I've experienced it that way. I really find a lot of a thing that I do to creatively express myself is I like cocktails, and I like designing and experimenting and like mixing things. I like cooking too. So those are both things that I like find creative expression through. So I like drinking alcohol and doing it with my friends and trying to be creative and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think for that reason too, that's something that I know you've given me, our family talking about this, having this be a part of my life growing up has given me the language to understand what that means now and what it could mean if I let it get out of hand for any reason. So if I wasn't thinking about these things, imagine another world where you never have that conversation with me and, I pretend you're still around, but I'm, not having that influence and we're not talking about it as a family. Would I know to watch out for those things? Would I have already crossed a point where it was too late to figure that out? I don't know. So I try to keep those two things in my brain at all times.
Wonderful. Well, that's super encouraging to me. So one of the things that you've seen happen for me too is this last few years, I've gotten loud, right? I mean, you're recording a podcast, so you're participating in this. What I love this term that people are using, recovering out loud. I love that. Yeah, I mean, what do you think of it? And you're also in a corporate situation a lot where you're seeing the kinds of places that I'm trying to influence, assuming that that that's what I'm trying to influence. Yeah. What do you think of it?
I think part of that is we both worked for the same company. So I've seen, the insides of places like that. With that company and other companies now, I've been at work situations where I was made uncomfortable by the level of alcohol that others were consuming and the culture around it and the expectation around it. So number one, I've dealt with that, not as a person who is sober or as a person who is trying to be sober. So it's a different level of engagement and interpretation, but I felt those things. But more than that, like as your nephew, I'm proud, Brett. Like
Thanks,
I'm proud of that. Like, I think you're such a role model for me in that way that like you've turned your life around. We've talked about what would have happened if you hadn't gotten sober before. And it's as a person who loves you, it's scary to imagine that and what my life would be like if that hadn't happened. And so not just to figure that out in the way that you have. And I don't even want to say figured it out as if it's a puzzle that you've solved,
right?
Sure. It's always growing and there's always changes and new pieces and things that you've got to navigate and deal with. But to get to the point where you are now from some of the stories I've heard about what was going on before, like that in itself is an achievement. And I'm just proud that now you've made it so much of a part of your life to help other people do that same thing. I think that's awesome and really cool. And you've always been a loud person to me. And so to see you put that towards a thing like this is really, really cool. And I want you to know that like, I never have any, like when we worked at the same company together, I never had any shame about that, about having people see, Dakota, isn't that your uncle who's on this company-wide check-in talking about getting blasted at a work retreat and getting sober now? Like if that had happened, I would have been proud to be like, yeah, he is. And this is a resource that exists at this company that doesn't before. So I think it's awesome. And I'm just so proud, so happy to see that's going on.
Well, I'm proud to have you on this podcast and I'm proud that we get to continue to have these conversations. And to your point a second ago, I'm not sure I would have made it had I not made the switch. So we'll get to have lots more conversations over time. I have a chronic condition. It's never going to go away. And so there might become a time when I need your help. Yeah. And I will ask for it. Even if that's just to excuse me, I'm going to leave this situation. It has nothing to do with you and X, Y, and Z or whatever. Yeah. And just that your knowledge of it, we've done the legwork. We've done the reps to get you to understand that it has nothing to do with anybody but me taking care of myself. Yeah. Right. So
I had a thing I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
Something I've been curious about is looking at it the last like 5 years, especially. So you're 10, close to 11 years now of sobriety. And, the last 5 years, a lot in the world has happened that I would imagine has made that really difficult. So if you're comfortable talking about it, like, I'd love to know, something like COVID comes around.
Yeah.
How hard, like, what is going on? Because, with addiction, it's so easy for something cataclysmic like that to happen and to fall back into, the old patterns, the old habits, the old desires.
Yeah.
So what has that been like for you navigating these last, just big events, a COVID, a layoff, whatever it is? How have you been able to do that?
Oh man, that's a great question. So let me try to be as succinct as I can. So first off, for reference for people that are listening that are interested in patterns, which I am, I've heard a lot of stories about COVID and people getting sober during it and people relapsing during it. And the statistics are it was hard on our society.
Yeah.
Drugs and alcohol use.
I think, sorry, just to interrupt, I don't think I'm a heavy drinker, but during COVID, that was the most I've ever been drinking in my life. Like during that, year and a half we were in lockdown, coming out of it and having some other bad personal stuff going on. That was the worst. That was the closest I've ever been to that line. I don't think not to the point where I was like, I'm on an edge here, but that big kind of thing is, I've experienced that. So.
Yeah. So, now I'm going to talk about my story, my experience, right? So, there's a lot of people that say 5 years is sort of a bit of a magic number in terms of the likelihood of you staying consistently sober. There's statistics on that. I don't have them close. So I've already had the 5 years under my belt, but really for me, my program, and that's a word I use that used to bug me, but my efforts to stay sober. It's one thing to get sober. It's another thing to stay sober. Is based on, I've just in the last while, I've come to, it's basically two pillars. I can't ever forget, and connection seems to help. Those are the two. And so in my case, to your point, with the oncoming of COVID, many of the meetings closed down, right? So the places where I could go and connect and not forget were kind of eliminated.
Yeah, unavailable.
Zoom wakes up and there's all these meetings, and that becomes a little overwhelming, just like it did in corporate America. Everybody sort of overcompensated with, a ridiculous amount of social Zoom things, and everybody was piling on.
It's crazy. And I feel to dive in on that more, not only is that kind of upheaval to routine going on.
Yeah.
Your connections are gone. What you've built in and to use your word, programmed into your daily routine, those avenues are gone. And at the same time, you're feeling the need to, continue working, whatever. You're having to continue this routine with this also new pressing, overwhelming thing looming over the top of us of COVID, of what's going to happen. Are we going to be okay? All these new stressors. Yeah. Even just, if just the routine was changed, that'd be enough. If just this new scary thing happened, that would be enough. But both of those things combined, it's just sometimes it's overwhelming what do you do? How do you navigate it? Where do you start?
well, in my case, so I'm going to talk about the disease model. Until the cravings went away, I really didn't have much. I mean, cravings are like this biological condition that only another alcoholic or drug addict, when we sit down and talk about it, it's not like you want chocolate chip cookies. It's like you can't breathe until you get some drinks in you, right? So I've experienced that. And until that was gone, it would have been really hard. And I know a lot of people that hangs on for a while, and those people are amazing. But I also, in my program, in my case, I'm going to use AA. One of the things I love about AA is it's very convenient. It's everywhere, always. And I can go in and take what I need and leave the rest. And one of the things that's in there is a constant reminder of people who test it. And what I mean by test it is they say they do some extra research to discover that this thing is for real. One drink, Coda, and I go back. It may take a week. It may take a month. But the cravings come back online. So as soon as the cravings are back in play, I'm in trouble. The reverse side of that coin is I really like being sober. I've gotten to where I really like being able to go to a concert and see all the signs of the places and the things I used to do and be like, there is nothing attractive about that. I see myself stumbling through the audience. There I am, and that doesn't look like fun to me anymore. And I'm grateful for that. Right. And I think that's common too, is this kind of like change of attitude about life in general. And so when people say, well, what's your program? Well, my program is really, bottom line is, I can't, no matter what, never, zero, can't put any booze in my body ever again. That's primary. So I do reps and I think about things about very traumatic situations that will likely come up, and some that I have, including COVID. And I do little mental experiments. What am I going to do if the cravings show back up? Well, I have things I'm going to talk to people, but I've already got all this. I got this pattern. I put on my lucky socks. I put on my lucky shirt. I do the things that have worked for me. And sometimes I think, well, this is kind of silly and repetitive, but it's working. So and it's not bad. It's like kind of fun to hang out with other people who are in sobriety or trying to find sobriety and just hanging out, talking. So yeah, for me, I've yet to have I should knock on wood on this one. I've yet to have a big, stressor or a situation where the cravings show up. I have a dream once in a while. It's pretty intense. I'll have a passing thought. For the most part, I'm just situationally aware at all times that I have to protect myself. Yeah. So specific to me, there's a lot of people I know that got into trouble with alcohol and are still working their way out of it from COVID that maybe don't have the condition that I have. So it's like a moderation thing that can be back in their lives. For me, there was never any moderation. Yeah. So I'm either on or off. It's binary. So
floodgates open or not.
Has to be off for me forever. And one sip and I hear the stories. I know what happens. And,
well, thanks for answering that. That was interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's, a thing. We've talked about COVID, obviously, and all that stuff, but we never really talked about it in that context. So that was interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
No, I last thing I'll say is I remember listening. I think it was, if it wasn't the first episode of the podcast you did, it was one of the first ones, but where you really went in depth and talked about your story of those, going from the very end of when you were drinking to when you were ready to finally, start, and all those, steps up to it, and going to AA and talking to a doctor for like all those things. Yeah. And one thing that I always remember from that story and that I think about a lot is you saying that in the tail end of those days, getting, really drunk at a night by yourself and looking in the mirror and saying, are we having fun, Brett? Yeah. Sorry. And I carry that with me. I want you to know. Yeah. And I use that not just with drugs and alcohol, but with everything in my life, with situations, with my job, with whatever. And I look myself in the mirror and I say, Dakota, are you having fun? Yeah. Is this what you want for yourself, for your life, for your relationships, whatever? And that's been a guide for me.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. That's a great place to stop. Oh, I love you, buddy. Thank you.
Yeah. Love you, man.
Yeah. Love you too. Thanks, Dakota. Thanks for being willing to share your thoughts on this topic and sort of reflect on our time with this disease in our family that I have. And I hope it was enlightening to those that have listened. I'm going to put some links in the show notes to some resources. If you or a loved one wants to get curious, there's a lot of things to check out. So thanks for your patience between episodes, and take good care.